Hi, my name is Bobby Fouch Reynolds, and I'm the editor of First Look magazine that comes out from our church. And I would like to take this opportunity to personally thank Mark Fowler for his kindness, his support, his enthusiasm, and his good humor as we put this together 4 times a year. Thank you, Mark.
Hi, Pastor Ron. We can't thank you enough for everything that you've done for the youth group and the kids in the church. Your energy is infectious, and it's been great to see you interacting with the young of the church, and can't wait to see what the youth group and the young kids will be doing in the years to come. Thank you again.
Mark, we just so appreciate your leadership of our congregation. You are a preacher who is fantastic, and we learn so much from your sermons, and more importantly, we learn so much from the way in which you lead us in devotion and discipleship. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron, for being such a great example of bravery coming to this church and leading with such energy, and for all the energy you put into the youth program as well.
This is Doug Knudsen. Just want to thank you for all the extra effort that you have had to supply to us to help us continue with our activities and to engage with each other. What a struggle. Thank you for all those efforts.
Amen. Amen. What a welcome. This is Pastor Appreciation Month, and we're grateful for this. I was told about 5 minutes ago we were going to do this again, so I decided that I would not be speechless. So I want to just say thank you. It is a wonderful thing to be welcomed into the sanctuary of this church, but oftentimes we don't hear those words, and both of us, all 3 of us, are very grateful to that, for that. I thought it was interesting when someone thanked Ron for her courage to come to this church. I think it takes a lot of courage to come to a church that has a high bar on their mission, their expectation, and their discipleship. And so I think I can speak for all 3 of us. We are grateful to this congregation. So give yourself a round of applause, and we are grateful. I want to welcome those who are with us via the internet, and they are very much with us. We have been following the numbers throughout the year, and for everyone that is here at about this hour, there is an equal number that are with us via the internet, whom I call the Pajama Parish, and I've said that a couple of times, and I got a note a couple of weeks ago that said, maybe everybody else is in their pajama, but I still get up and I dress in a suit and tie. So whoever that is, let us welcome them as well. We'd like to welcome the Blessed Brass under the baton of Carrie Backman. Would you welcome them with us? And it is a special moment that Dan Wolpert is with us, sitting in his traditional place, and we are so grateful for him. So welcome all. Ron?
Welcome to new visitors to church this morning. Please stop by the Welcome Center. And new online worshipers, please contact us through our website or email to info@fumc.org. We would like to know you, and we have a welcome gift for you. Please fill out the Connect card and put it in the box before you leave. Online worshipers, please submit a Connect card through our website or using QR code. This way, you can help us to know who are here and how we can support you better. And thank you so much for all the volunteers. Your time, your talent, and service keep our ministry growing and let God's hands reach out to more people. Please find more ways to serve with us at FUMC.org. Get involved, volunteer interest. We need your help for taking care of the sanctuary, the Sunday worship service, altar flower, music ministry, senior ministry, Sunday school, Sunday coffee hour, Wednesday outreach breakfast, and many more. So please find me or Welcome Center for more information about our volunteer opportunities. We will have trunk or treat Halloween party on Sunday, October 30th at 11 o'clock through 12:30 in the parking lot. So this will be the public event for the children in this community. So we need more host cars and sweet treat donations. So please contact Lori Peterson for more information. As a part of Arts at First series, there will be Madison Brass Band concert on Sunday, October 30th at 2 o'clock in the sanctuary. So please join us for a beautiful afternoon with music. Christmas poinsettia order is open. $15 for each plant. Order can be made by Sunday, November 6th. So please stop by the Welcome Center for more information. Sharing Our Journeys class meets at 11 o'clock in the chapel and via Zoom. Especially today, Reverend Dr. Fowler will lead us and teach us the women in the Bible, Ruth and Naomi. An emergent theology class meets via Zoom only at 11:15. Racial equity and justice class meets via Zoom on Wednesdays at 6 o'clock. Please contact Welcome Center for more information about adults education programs.
Yes, thank you. One other thing, and that is to thank the choir in the women, especially of the Hebrew Bible. We have been looking at 3 of them, and they are captured in the songs that they sing. And so we want to thank the choir that leads us in those songs. Thank you very much. And so let us praise God for a ministry of song that gladdens our hearts, that carries our laments, and sustains us through our lives. As we stand, we pass the peace to those who are with us, and pass the peace of Christ to each other. The peace of the Lord be with you.
Peace be with you.
Amen.
Peace be with you.
Peace to you.
Peace be with you.
Peace, peace, peace.
You may be seated. And it's time for our young Christians. I know this time of the year, many of our young Christians are sick. They are willing to spread everything, right? Because they love each other. So many of our kids are sick, so please send your hugs and prayers for our kids. Good morning. How would you express your love to the person you love? By hugging them. Some write letters, some give presents, and some try to spend more time together. Either way, we'd like to try to make that person we love feel happy, right? Today, we are going to talk about two women in the Bible. Wait, we also talked about two women in the Bible last week. Any of you remember who that were? No?
No, but I can't remember what it was about.
Starts with L. Lois and Eunice. Today we are going to talk about Naomi and Ruth. Naomi lived in the country of Moab with her family. There was a severe famine in Moab, so many people did not have food. And Naomi lost many of her family, including her husband and sons. Now, all that Naomi had left was her daughter-in-laws. She was very, very sad. Naomi decided to go back to her hometown of Bethlehem. She told her daughter-in-laws that they should stay with their families in Moab, but they didn't want to leave her. They all cried. Finally, her daughter-in-law named Orpah went home to her family, but another daughter-in-law named Ruth wouldn't leave. Ruth hugged Naomi and would not leave her. Soon, they made the journey together back to Bethlehem. Despite the loss of her husband and sons, Naomi was happy with Ruth, who accompanied her to Bethlehem with her. Ruth did not have to stay with Naomi. She could have let Naomi travel back to Bethlehem alone, but instead, she went with her because she loved her. God wants you to love others as well. Then, can you share one way that you can love someone like Ruth loved Naomi this week? How can we show our love to others?
You can tell a person you love them, but also you can, like, I spend a lot of time with my grandma, but I think my other grandma kind of feels left out, so I could spend more time with her.
Or you can give a phone call to your grandma and say, I love you, Grandma, right? Yeah, good. Let us pray. Dear God, we know that you loved us so much, so you sent Jesus to show your love to us. Help us show this love to the many people we meet in our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
As we come to our main time of prayer, we want to remember people that are in our congregation who are struggling with aging and declining health issues. Shirley Blank, Iris Peterson, Jan Canty, Carolyn Anderson, Tom Granis, Roy Jacobs. We also want to lift up and remember people whose lives are upended by war in their country, certainly Ukraine, and just recently South Sudan. We pray also for our own families in this congregation as they grieve the loss of loved ones, for Nancy Bart's family, for the family of Ramona Cliff, whose funeral is tomorrow, for Peter Mortenson's family, and for Bob Kaufman's family. And we ask for healing and wholeness for Sherry Caves, who had hip replacement surgery this past week and is in the process of recovering and healing. One of the things you need to know about the story of Ruth and Naomi is that God is constantly weaving a story of redemption through all the details of our lives. And it's hard for us to understand that because we're experiencing the minutiae, the difficult details, but that God is weaving something miraculous in those stories. The Reverend Dr. Sophia Focia, who is the Director of Preaching Ministries at the General Board of Ministries, has written prayers for the African Book of Worship, and I share a prayer with you today that she has written that I find very meaningful. So let us pray. Make my life a libation poured out like oil, diffused through air like perfume, blessing multitudes. Make me a libation poured out to God, not Mother Church or someone else's agendas. An emissary of Christ, a lighthouse, a cattle prod, good news and conscience goad, bringing tidings of peace and warnings of wrath to come. Let me not be sacrificed on the altar of the church's indifference, nor let me confuse sacrifice with suffering for selfish gain. At the end of my days, when life on this globe is over, let it be truthfully said, my life was poured out for you. We pray this prayer as we say together, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Thank you, choir, and blessed brass. The book of Ruth is one of those gems of Scripture. If you haven't read it for a while, check it out. It's only about 4 pages long, but it is a great story. And the chapter that we share today from the first chapter of the book of Ruth is a chapter that, while seemingly about loss and even death, even there is found hope and redemption amidst the honesty of loss and grief. Nan described it very well in the children's time. Listen for the word of God. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to live in the country of Moab, he and his wife and 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other, Ruth. When they had lived there for about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons or her husband. Then she started to return with her daughters-in-law from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had had consideration for his people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she had been living, she and her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to go back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find security, each of you in the house of your husband." Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. They said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why do you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. And even if I thought that there was hope for me, even if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you then wait until they were grown? Would you refrain from marrying? No, my daughters. It has been far more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of the Lord has turned against me." Then they wept out aloud again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law."
And Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave thee. Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord doth so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me, if aught but death part thee and me. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God.
When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" She said to them, "Call me no longer Naomi. Call me Mara, for the Lord has dealt bitterly with me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi, when the Lord has dealt harshly with me, and the Lord has brought calamity upon me?" So Naomi returned together with Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, who came back with her from the country of Moab. They came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Here ends the lesson from Ruth. The light to our path.
Amen. Amen. When I was praying about what Ruth said, it certainly didn't sound like that. So beautiful and so wonderfully read. Thank you for that. Before I begin to preach, from up here, sometimes you can't see everybody that is out there, but we would like to welcome Phil Greenwood, who I'm told is toward the back. Phil, if you're here, would you stand? Am I right about that? Oh, Phil, great. Welcome. Phil is transferring to First United Methodist Church. And we will make a pledge to you like Ruth made to Naomi. We're glad that you're with us, and welcome to this place. Let us pray. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable and blessed in your sight, dear Lord, for you and you alone. Our rock, and our Redeemer. Amen. The beauty of that pledge, if nothing else is known of this very short book, as Scott said, it's told that it is hardly ever read on a Sunday because you should probably read the whole thing. But it's that poetry of a pledge. Wherever you go, or some of us who are raised in the time of King James, whither thou goest, I will go. It's often read at weddings. One of the friends of the groom or the bride is asked to read this piece, and they haven't read it before, and they get up and they begin to read it, and you can tell they get choked up halfway through. And one of them, right in the middle of it, looked at her friend who was the bride and said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I went to a wedding of two of my students, two men. They got married, and it was interesting to hear them read it to each other instead of the traditional vows, which no longer worked in terms of the language that they used. And so they read mutually, one to the other, "Wherever you go, I will go. Your people shall be my people." They were two people from very different walks of life, two people from different parts of the globe, two people from two religious backgrounds, but the unity and the meaning of this pledge, it brought us all to tears. I think the pastor, rightly so, simply asked them to join hands and declared that they were married without saying a word. Then there was a benediction as we all continued to simply weep with joy at that dedication. Leonard Cohen, when he was in the last years of his life, he would begin the second set of his concert by singing that well-known Hallelujah. But the very end of the concert was "Whither Thou Goest," knowing that he was struck with the illness that would finally take him. Again, that pledge of unity. May God do this thing and more, even if death comes between us. Ruth is only one of two biblical books named for a woman, the other being Esther. But it is the only one that is named for one who was not a member of the tribes of the Hebrews. As Scott read it through, you realize she is a Moabite. She is a Moabite. And up until the time when I had an examination about what a Moabite was, I wanted to skip on to the pledge. Isn't that the heart of the text? But Ruth is a Moabite. Moabites, at the time when this was written, were the arch enemies of the Hebrews. They were not just another group in the neighborhood. They were the descendants of Lot, not of Abraham. They had been separated for a very long time. Those who were Moabites, the descendants of Lot, did not fall heir to the 10 Commandments that were given to Moses, did not share the story of the journey through the wilderness into the promised land. They were different people. Israelites didn't like Moabites. And so therefore, I think in the old days, before we read every word of Scripture as if Moabite just tripped off the tongue, as if they were lovable people, it probably would have been said with a great sneer. I'm glad you didn't do that this morning. There was a famine, you see. All those promises that brought together the people Israel in the promised land, all of the defense that had been prayed for, all of the celebration of the song of Miriam, when God had led the Hebrew children out of bondage in Egypt and brought them to the promised land, and they sang together the song of Miriam, that the horse and rider are thrown into the sea, and we have been saved and brought to this land of promise. And when there was a threat by the Canaanites, Deborah rose up and she sang of the wonderful victory that God had provided, that kept us safe in this land, in a land that is flowing with milk and honey, where we might live in covenant together with God. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy lay out the rules by which we should live, the laws that are introduced that basically tell us how to live. It's interesting. I wish, well, anyway, I won't go there because somebody will say you're getting political again, and I don't want to do that, but I wish that sometimes we realized that laws, if we read the book of Ruth, include only so many. And then there are others that fall afoul of the law. And this is where we meet Ruth. But more importantly, Naomi and her husband, Elimelech. They had lived according to the laws, the 10 words that came down from Sinai, the teachings of Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. They had celebrated the land which had been protected when the judges rose up. The story of Joshua and Judges. But now we are at the story of Ruth. God is no longer the one that comes in victory and in triumph, because here we meet Naomi and Elimelech. They, first of all, have to leave the promised land. And when Scott read it and they went to the land of Moab, none of you shouted out, "Oh no, not Moab!" They don't like you there. They're horrible people. We have known that since the beginning of the story of Moses. We have known that because Lot left. We have known that because there was a pillar of salt. We have known that because they were barred from coming into the land of promise. We have known that because they do not keep the kosher laws. We have known that because they haven't memorized the 10 words. They are awful people. Why are you going there? Simple answer. We're hungry. You see, all of those laws didn't count anymore because they were hungry. They had 2 sons to raise. But they're going to go into unholy ground. And worse yet, their sons are going to marry Moabite women. Remember that this is a culture in which your identity is passed down through the female line. Naomi's sons are heirs to the covenant of Moses because she is an heir to the covenant of Moses. But here they are. They are in the land of Moab. This is like the question that we used to talk to each other about in seminary. No, it actually was in junior high school. Which is, if Adam and Eve only had 2 sons, where did their wives come from? That's exactly correct. We have a studied choir. This is the answer. It's actually not even the point of the story. But for a junior high schooler, it is the point of the story. But I hope we grow up from time to time. Naomi, has lost the promised land. And now, because her sons marry Moabite women, Ruth and Orpah, her grandchildren will not fall heir to the promises of Moses. You see where this story begins to go? And this is a period of time when women could not earn a living on their own. They had to depend upon their husbands or their sons. That although it passes down through women that these are of the household of Israel, their income, their economic livelihood, their life is dependent upon their husbands and their sons. And what is the next thing Scott read? And Elimelech died. You see how secure she was? And although she left the promised land and went to a land of Moab, she still had a husband and 2 sons. And although those sons married Moabite women, still she had the financial security of Elimelech and her 2 sons. And Elimelech dies early. She's a bit concerned. You see, my understanding of Naomi is she is a woman of the word. She relies on the covenants that were made in the name of God, that were given by God. And one by one by one by one, those assurances of a bountiful life are being taken away. And then her 2 sons die. 3 women alone. And all of a sudden, Naomi has nothing. But she realizes, and you catch this in the text, she realizes that her 2 daughters-in-law are in their own land. And she says, you can go back to your mother and basically start all over again. There's a promise that you'll have husbands, but I'm too old. And even if I did have a child, it's hard to get married to a baby when you're in your 30s. It's tragic. So this is an incredible story. It's a very sad story at this point. Naomi files a complaint that all of those promises of God have gone away. And she feels abandoned. The teaching professor at Garrett used to say, you have to find good news in a sermon. I was nervous up until this morning. And then I thought, I was a professor of preaching too. I can disagree. But then I remembered these songs, the song of Miriam, the song of Deborah, the song of Ruth. These songs, in the middle of an incredibly large male presence that would have written down Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, and Judges, these little scraps of songs were sung by women within the community. Wise women, they are called. In the 1950s, however, they used to write commentaries that said, oh, that can't be true. They had to be sung by the Levites because men were the only ones who spoke. And I keep thinking, we can't really get stuck in the 1950s now, can we? United Methodist denomination? And you see, the issue about these songs is that women are portrayed in the lyric as those who realize the reality of life that doesn't fit the law. Shall I say that again? It's what we as a church are called to do. It is the realities of life that do not fit the law. The lived experience that most of us have, that we hide in the imperfections. It didn't say the entirety of Jerusalem and Bethlehem went to Moab like a mass movement. They were alone going to Moab. How many people amongst us hide those things that don't quite fit the law, about which we are embarrassed? I've heard this from time to time. I thought you had 2 children. You only talk about 1. You hear what I'm saying with that? Yeah, but that other child doesn't really fit the law. Doesn't fit what we expect. Everything we're supposed to do, because we are faithful people, is supposed to be successful. I was doing work with a very well-heeled church in the Chicago suburbs, and the downturn of 2008 happened. The attendance dropped 33% as quickly as the stock market. How does that work with your prosperity gospel? Hear what I'm saying? The law should not be, even in Jesus' teaching, walked away from, but it is not sufficient to human experience. And the songs of Miriam and Deborah, but especially of Ruth, fill in the reality that that is true. And it is true that Naomi did feel completely abandoned by every single piece of the covenant that made sense to her when her sons died. And she was going to leave Moab and hopefully go home to Bethlehem. But remember, this is a people who understood the story of the prodigal son quite well. What story is she telling herself as she goes home? Because she knows her neighbors are going to say, "You've been with the Moabites? You let your sons marry Moabite women? You know about Moabite women. You've eaten their barley. You abandoned us." And like the prodigal son, oh, I can be a servant. I can feed the pigs. But there are these 2 Moabite daughters-in-law. Go back. Go back. Go back to your mother's house. Go back and start your life all over again. Go back. Go back, and you will be blessed according to that old law. The law that's a little looser here in Moab, because the Moabites were a little looser than the Jerusalemites. Orpah says, no, I don't want to go back. She's crying because of the affection that she has for Naomi and Ruth. She's a widow after all. She's grieving along with her former mother-in-law. But her mother-in-law insists, and it makes all the sense in the world now, doesn't it? You can forget about this real past, and you will have a new husband, and you will have a new family, and everything will be fine for you here in Moab. We will miss you a bit around the holidays. And Ruth, you go back too. And the word in the text is, and Ruth clung to her. Actually, the word in Hebrew is, and she cleaved to her. If you remember the old wedding services, and I was there in the 19th century when they used to use these words. And in the King James Version, it's the same. And a woman shall leave her household and cleave to her husband, and the two shall become one flesh. Ruth cleaved to Naomi. This isn't just an inappropriately long hug during the passing of the peace. Wherever you go, I will go. Your people shall be my people. Your God will be my God. Where you die, I will be buried. This isn't just because they had insurance enough to buy a plot in the local cemetery. The promise is that you will be buried with your ancestors. Ruth had never left her hometown in Moab, but cleaved to Naomi. You see, in this part of the narrative, we realize God is perceived to have abandoned them. But this foreign Moabite woman vows never to abandon Naomi. Friends, the idea that God abandons us does not end with Ruth. It happens on Calvary's hill. My God, why have you forsaken me, abandoned me, left me alone here to die? And in my years of ministry, I don't mean to be a wise old sage. I could be a wise old something else, but the truth of God's fidelity may be spoken about in the Bible, spoken about in the text, but it's most profound when the very nature of God upon which we depend is expressed in the promises that another person makes. And that is why we gather. It may be to hear about a God that for some of us, we don't understand if we even believe, or may be too far away and too high up. But it's a hope that within the congregation of the gathered, in the work that we do and the outreach that we have, that among us there are many whom we would call Ruth, who make that promise. Wherever you go, I will go. And when there is a new one who comes amongst us, by the time they leave our service of worship, our fellowship hour, our outreach ministries, what we do day in and day out, although they may not use these words, they may say, I felt welcome. I hope they feel welcome. Welcome enough that they will have known what Ruth promised to Naomi. And through that, know the nature, perhaps not of God, although it is God's nature, but of God's good people. Amen.
Hear these words from John Wesley. I am no longer my own, but yours. Put me to what you will, rank me with whom you will. Put me to doing, put me to suffering. Let me be employed for you or laid aside for you, exalted for you or brought low for you. Let me be full, let me be empty. Let me have all things, let me have nothing. I freely and wholeheartedly yield all things to your pleasure and disposal. And now, glorious and blessed God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, you are mine and I am yours. So be it. And the covenant now made on earth, let it be ratified in heaven. Amen.
God has dealt wonderfully with us. We have what we need. Now we are called to share from our abundance to support the work of God through the ministries of this church. May we give gladly to thank God for our call to be Christ's hands and feet in the world. You can give as usher passing the plate. You also can give online using direct Venco link or QR code, or you can mail your check to church. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to invite Anne and Kent Peterson.
Wow. Wow, thank you all for this worship service so far. So I'm Kent Peterson, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what this church has meant to me for the last 30 plus years. It's been an extremely important part of my life and the life of my family. I was a late starter, beginning church attendance as a teenager. I was baptized when I was 12. After a hiatus of many years, I returned to church in Nashville when Ann and I found a Methodist church that resonated with our values and our interests. But FUMC now has been a meaningful part of my life for decades. I was a little concerned about the prayer for those of us who are getting older. I guess it is a challenge, but for decades. And my life has really been enriched and deepened, by worship, music, and the incredible activities and wonderful sense of community here. Wow. Worship is a time to reflect on my relation to God and others and find greater understanding of his teachings, which is really important to me because I didn't start understanding his teachings until I was a teenager. Oh, and the music here has warmed my heart and, like today, stirred my soul, filling me with joy. And the varied activities that I can participate in are so important to me. Book studies, seminars on serious topics, the opportunities to serve others through free meals, opening on cold polar days for members of the neighborhood, food donations, and the overall support for others in need. All of these have made it possible to give back. This place for me has been a true sanctuary and a community that I value and can connect with during times of joy and also times of discord and sorrow. It has been important to me to share what I can, whether money, resources, time, or support. For this church has already given me more than I can ever give back. Thank you, First United.
It's tempting to just let that be the message. Thank you.
Okay.
So this this congregation is my church home since 1987, when we moved here from Nashville, Tennessee, with our 3 sons, ages 3, 3, and 5, and yes, that's a set of twins. I grew up at a large downtown church in Canton, Ohio, and in those days, which was a long time ago, everything important happened at church. It was the hub of activity for youth and adults, and here's where fellowship and faith flourished and deepened. So First Church was a natural place for us to bring our young family. Our sons grew up here and participated in Sunday school, confirmation, Appalachian Service Project, and youth group, which has given them a sound foundation upon which to explore their own faith. As adults, Kent and I found a welcoming community that has sustained and grown our faith. Over the years, there have been many changes in pastors, staff, and lay leadership, but what has stayed constant is the mission of First Church: radical hospitality, spiritual formation, and service. I've appreciated the opportunities to contribute in study and fellowship and worship and leadership. I'm also aware of the significant work that is needed to sustain and nurture the organization so that faith continues to grow and community continues to be strong. The generosity of everyone's time, talents, skills, and financial support are needed to ensure the strength and growth of this, the beloved community. Please join us in experiencing the joys and blessings of giving. Thank you.
Please stand as we say together the Wesleyan invitation. Do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as ever you can. Remain standing as we sing our final hymn, How Firm a Foundation.
Amen. I know that it is a promise of Scripture that upon which I rely, that there is nowhere that we can go. The highest heights, the lowest depths, the most arid plain, or the lush places where God is not with us. But I thank God for the Ruths that have been there when I have been there. And though all hell should endeavor to shake, God has said, I'll never, no never forsake. I know that because I have known you and many with whom I have traveled, the faith that we share together. Go in peace, and the peace of Christ go with you.